Nigeria's power sector was unbundled and partially privatized to establish a competitive market intended to improve management and efficiency. Of course, also attract private investment, increase generation, and provide reliable and cost-effective power supply. But however, over the past years, a myriad of challenges confronting the power sector is yet to be solved, leading to acute power shortage and poor performance as operational generation capacity dropped by 33%, as only 23% of the cost of electricity produced recovered, or production, I beg your pardon, is recovered. Since 2001, government has spent billions of naira and dollars in constructing new power generation facilities, transmission lines, and distribution centers to boost the power supply. It has also deregulated the generation and distribution sectors to encourage private sector participation and empower the Energy Commission of Nigeria to embark on programs and strategies that can boost energy generation from renewable sources. I have joining me now live to give an expert insight into our topic today. That he's the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Century Power Generation Limited, Mr. Chukwueloka Ume. Dr. Chukwueloka Ume, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much, Dr. Ume, for your time.
Thank you very much, Tolu, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Great. First, I want to start with what happened lately, the issue of tariffs, cost-reflective tariff. That's what we've been talking about. The discos have maintained that that's what they want. But government was able to go back and say, okay, let's go revisit this for another 2 weeks. But now the discos maintain that without this kind of tariff, they will not attract investment and they will not be able to invest in the transmission lines, generating lines, and all of them. Everybody have the same complaints. Now, how does this come to you? Let's start that way.
Thank you for that question. I've said this many times over. The government still owns part of the electricity value chain. Government owns the transmission lines completely. They own almost 50% of all the generating plants in Nigeria, and they still own 40% of the discos. So it's not really completely privatized yet. Now, not just the discos, but the different people in the value chain have been saying that we need to see a cost-reflective tariff. And really what that boils down to is, if I generate a product and sell to a consumer, I want to be able to make my money back at a profit. Now, the conversation has been going on for many years, and what the government proposed is a service-reflective tariff. Now, this sounds different from the cost-reflective tariff, but it's supposed to boil down to the same thing. However, with the caveat that for you to charge someone more for the electricity, they need to see the service. And what this boils down to really is those people who have seen their tariffs go up are supposed to receive a certain number of hours of electricity per day. And they've been grouped into about 5 different bands. People in the A, B, C bands are supposed to see at least more than 12 hours of electricity per day. And then, of course, by the time you get to the A band, they're supposed to see about 20 hours non-stop of electricity per day. But with all the things that are going on now in the country, my opinion, we definitely need to see the tariff change. However, with the pandemic and with the hardships in the country, this may not be the right time for the government to do this. And this is why the Labour Congress or the Labour unions came out in force, and the government had to walk back what they said. And the 2 weeks have elapsed. The government has given an additional 1 week to review the price increase. And we're yet to see what will happen at the end of that 1 week.
Indeed, we are yet to see what will happen at the end of that 1 week. Now, let's go back to the issue of privatization, which was expected to improve supply of electricity. Now, we've had experts, we've had, private sector operators come up to say that this should be revisited. Some said there should be a review. Now, what would you say about the process itself? How well has it fared?
The process was set up, and it was a good process that was set up. I mean, you can never get it perfectly. However, one thing that we've seen is the rules keep changing. And of course, when you set up a process and you keep changing the rules, things are going to be all over the place. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. By now, we should have seen the entire value chain completely privatized and government staying the role of simply setting the regulations to guide how the industry runs. That hasn't happened. And I insist that this is why we still keep seeing the sector not work. People thought that once you privatize the sector, I mean, like 1 year later, you will start getting 24 hours of electricity. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic. And now with what I just said now, the rules keep changing. It's not going to happen until the government completely privatizes the sector, puts it in the hands of private companies who will be able to go into bankable agreements so that they can raise the monies that are necessary to do the upgrades. Now, don't get me wrong, Tolu. We're talking about a lot of money in billions of dollars to build an electricity generating plant, about 450 megawatts, for example, in Nigeria today, cost anywhere between 500 million to 900 million because of the cost of doing business in the country. So you can imagine us having to build up to, say, I don't know, 25 gigawatts. That's a lot of money we're talking about. I haven't even touched the discos or even the transmission yet. So for us to do this and do it well, we must complete the privatization, put it in the hands of the private companies, let them deliver value, because people are ready to pay for electricity, but they need to see value. Nobody wants to pay for darkness. And unfortunately, in some places, people are paying for darkness. In the area where I live, my tariff was almost doubled, but I'm actually getting less electricity than I used to get before.
Same here.
Why would I pay that? You see what I mean? So it's a mess right now.
Oh, we've also had complaints around rejection from generation companies to TCN. Let me put it straight to you. I had a discussion with chief executive of one of the generation companies, and he was saying that they will generate more than 800 megawatts, and TCN is not taking something around 500. So we have like 300 plus stranded. We also hear stories of even discos at times rejecting, though they've come out to say, no, that's not been happening. So when we have all of these issues, how then are we supposed to attain improved supply? How do we get improved supply when we have rejection issues, we have gas issues? You know, Dr. Ume, it's worrisome.
Worrisome is an understatement. You know, in reality, yes, some discos have been rejecting power. But in fairness to them, you can't collect something that you can't pay for. So if a disco collects power and they send this power to end users, but because of all the losses and the theft that they have in the system, they're not able to collect their money back, they shouldn't take the product. Now, the Transmission Company of Nigeria has been making a lot of efforts to upgrade their infrastructure. They are limited in the amount of electricity they push out to people. It is, you know, so imagine that the TCN can only get maybe about 7.5 gigawatts to the discos. Now, the Gencos putting out electricity, all they know is that they're pumping out electricity and they expect to get paid for it. TCN can probably say that they can only get about 5 gigawatts to the discos, and at the end of the day, disco will say they get a percentage of the power that is supposedly sold to them. How then can they collect the money and pay? The gas producer and the gas transporter on the other hand are saying, I'm putting out X million scopes of gas to the Gencos per day, and the Gencos need to be paying me for it. But the Gencos are not able to pay because the discos are not paying them. So it is, I keep saying, I've been saying it for years, and I keep saying it, the value chain is entirely broken. And the only way we can start to fix this, look at the sector as a business, look at electricity as a business, and put it squarely in the hands of the private sector. And let the private sector go and fix it so that they can do business. Everything that the private sector runs, you can see that they run it as a business, just like telecoms. If you get credits, if you pay for credits, you get the service. If you don't get credit, what do? You port to another provider. And the telecom sector has been getting better and better over the years. So in the same way, this is what we need to do to the electricity sector. Anything short of that, I'm sorry to say this, but we're deceiving ourselves. And it's not going to change. And unfortunately, it's the Nigerian people that get to suffer for this.
Totally.
The Nigerian people deserve much better.
I agree with you. Now, this discussion would also be more interesting if we talk about metering. Nigerians would definitely like to hear about metering. We know what's been happening with regards to estimated billings issued from discos, and Nigerians face off labor with regards. Even the House of Reps at the time came up to talk also about estimated billings. Now that metering has been moved to, that's the meter access provider, that's MAP scheme, how well would you say Nigerians are getting metered? Is it better than what we used to have when the discos were managing it? They also talked about liquidity issues here, so we had to push. Now MAP is in charge. What's the difference? How are we getting better?
You know, we're just putting a bandage on a wound. We keep putting a bandage on the wound. We're not treating the wound itself. And as long as you're not treating the wound, it's not going to heal. The discos are the ones that are supposed to provide meters to their customers, right? The government came up with the MAP to kind of help the discos. Now, when they tell you that there's a liquidity issue, they are not getting paid for the power they sell, so they don't have enough money to invest. And even if they have the money to invest, there are regulations around how much the discos can invest every year. This doesn't really make sense. If I own a disco, I want to be sure that every customer within my network has a meter, so I know exactly what quantity of electricity they're getting, so I can bill for it. And when they're not paying, I will cut them off. But they're not able to do this. Yes, metering has improved a little bit. It's still way below par of where we need to be. So, you know what, Tulu? It's still more of the same. And the population is increasing. Now, across the entire country, we don't even have a very good understanding of how many people need electricity, what quantity of electricity we need, because there's a lot of suppressed demand. Some companies run fully on their diesel generators. Some companies are running fully on, well, some are now starting to use gas generators. But again, that keeps them off the grid. Some companies opt to stay off the grid because they want steady power, so they pay for it. And because of this, we don't really know how many people we have that can actually take this power. So until the discos are fully in charge of their destiny, and until you start to see competition within a disco's network, things are not going to change. And when I say competition, what I'm proposing is this. A disco can own a particular district, not a problem, but there should be energy traders within that district that can sell power to the different people. So if an energy trader, Mr. A, is not giving me the value that I need, I can go to Mr. B. Only then would you start to see value getting better. This is what happens in some of the countries that we've tried to copy the systems. We've copied, but we haven't pasted well enough, right? What I'm saying is not rocket science. A lot of people in Nigeria, some technocrats in Nigeria already know what I'm saying, and they've pushed this idea as well. But it's actually the implementation that's the problem. I just came from a gas conference yesterday organized by NNPC and Gas Aggregation Company of Nigeria. They did fantastically to organize that, to have the conversation in the Southeast. But guess what? Some of the right people were not at that table, were not in that conference. So again, it's more of the same. So we need to see a very different approach.
Dr. Ome, let's end on this note. What about the look energy mix? We've talked basically here about hydro, gas, and all of that. How well are we ready to also key into other forms of energy?
You know, one thing I know is Nigerians are very good at copying. But again, we're not very good at pasting or copying something that works within our own environment. Nigeria owns the world's ninth largest deposit of gas. What do you think we should be doing? We should be using the gas to give us the primary generation we need. Every other type of generation can come in. We already have some hydro, that's okay. Solar is good, wind is good, but those should not be the mainstay of our generation capacity today. Gas should be the mainstay because guess what? Gas is clean and the technologies are getting better. I personally worked on clean technologies when I was working in my days at GE. And these are something that GE sells to different countries. Why can I not benefit from the different things, from the different technologies that I personally worked on? You understand? So today, Nigeria should focus on gas. We should also look at coal. Yes, coal is dirty. However, there are technologies to clean coal up. True. I also worked on some of those technologies. True. So we have the energy, the fuels available here. We're just not tapping into it because of the reasons that I said earlier. The value chain is broken and we must fix it. There's no other way.
I must thank you very much for your time. Dr. Chukwueloka Ume is the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, Century Power Generation Limited. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us on Business Nigeria.
My pleasure, Tulu. Always nice to see you.